Welcome back to the Late Reader. The lamp is lit, the window is open, the rain has not stopped. Settle in. Listen.
Welcome back to The Late Reader. Tonight, we have a story that blurs the line between a tragic family history and something much darker. Have you ever had that gut feeling that a relative wasn't just eccentric, but actually dangerous? Our story tonight comes from a submitter who asks to remain anonymous. It involves a massive, isolated house, an obsession with the occult, and a midnight appointment that would have ended in absolute tragedy if the past hadn't caught up with the present. Lock your doors, turn down the lights, and let's get into it.
When I was 12 years old, my whole world collapsed. I lost both of my parents in an accident, and because I didn't have any immediate family left, I became a ward of the state. For a few months, I bounced around, until out of nowhere, an older cousin of my dad's, a guy named Arthur Abney, offered to take me in. I'd never met him. All I knew was that he lived in this massive, old money property out in the middle of nowhere called Aswarby Estate. Looking back, the red flags were there from the very first minute I arrived.
I was dropped off on a chilly September evening. The house was this huge, imposing brick mansion, surrounded by dense, dark woods. Cousin Abney was waiting for me on the porch. He was this tall, painfully thin guy who always wore a suit, even just hanging around the house. He didn't give me a hug or say he was sorry about my parents. Instead, he just rubbed his hands together, looked down at me, and said, "How old are you, boy?" I told him I was almost 12.
He smiled, this weird, tight smile. "And when is your birthday? September 11th? Excellent. So you're still under 12. Are you absolutely certain?" I told him yes. I remember thinking it was a really weird question to ask twice in the span of 2 minutes, but I was just an exhausted, grieving kid. I just wanted to go to bed.
The house was incredibly quiet. The only other person around was the live-in caretaker, Mrs. Bunch. She was a sweet, older woman who basically ran the place, while Abney spent all day locked in his massive library. Apparently, he was a retired university professor who obsessed over ancient mythologies, specifically obscure Roman and Greek pagan cults.
Mrs. Bunch and I got along great. I used to hang out in the kitchen with her just so I didn't have to wander the creepy, empty halls of that house alone. One evening in November, we were sitting by the stove, and I asked her if Cousin Abney was a good person. She smiled and said, "Oh, absolutely. He's a kind soul." "Why, did I ever tell you about the other 2 kids he took in?" My ears perked up. "Other kids?"
She went on to tell me that a few years prior, Abney had found a teenage runaway, a girl with no family, and brought her to live at the estate. A couple of years after that, he did the same thing with a young foreign kid who used to play a hand-cranked music box for change in the city. "Where are they now?" I asked.
Mrs. Bunch frowned. "Well, that's the sad part. Both of them just vanished. One morning, the girl was just gone. Never even packed her bags. A year later, the exact same thing happened with the boy. Left his little music box right there on the shelf. I guess street kids just get restless. But Mr. Abney was heartbroken. He even had the local pawns dragged. I didn't say anything, but a cold knot formed in my stomach. 2 kids, both with no families to look for them, taken in by this reclusive millionaire.
And then, the strange things started happening. Upstairs, at the end of the hallway where my bedroom was, there was a disused bathroom. The door was always locked, but the top half had this frosted, patterned glass you could kind of see through. One night, I got up to get a glass of water. The moon was incredibly bright, illuminating the hallway. As I walked past that locked bathroom, I glanced at the frosted glass. Someone was in the tub.
I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Through the hazy glass, I could make out a figure. It was a girl. Her skin looked gray and dusty, and she was draped in this pale, shroud-like clothing. But the most terrifying part was her face. She was looking right at the door, smiling this faint, agonizing smile. And her hands, both of her hands were pressed tightly over her chest, right where her heart should be. I heard this faint, muffled moan coming from inside the room. I didn't stick around. I ran back to my room, locked the door, and hid under my covers until the sun came up.
When I told Mrs. Bunch about it the next morning, she looked incredibly unsettled. She didn't say much, but later that day, I saw she had taped a thick piece of cardboard over the bathroom window so no one could look inside. But hiding the glass didn't stop whatever was in that house. A few weeks later, I woke up feeling freezing cold. I sat up in bed and realized my shirt was completely ruined. But it wasn't just torn, there were 4 deep, parallel slashes ripped through the fabric, right over the left side of my chest.
They looked exactly like claw marks. They didn't pierce my skin, but they tore through the heavy cotton like it was wet paper. I showed them to Mrs. Bunch, and I'll never forget the look of pure horror on her face. She told me to start locking my bedroom door every single night. Things peaked around late March, March 24th to be exact. It was a super windy, restless night. The trees outside were thrashing around, and the whole house felt tense. That afternoon, Cousin Abney pulled me aside.
"Stephen," he said, staring at me with these wide, feverish eyes, "I need you to come down to my study tonight, at exactly 11 p.m. I have something very important to discuss with you about your future, but listen to me carefully. Do not tell Mrs. Bunch. Tell no one. Just come to my study." I nodded, too intimidated to say no. Later that night, around 10:45, I was sitting in my room, trying to work up the nerve to go downstairs. The wind outside had died down, and the house was dead silent. I walked over to my window to look out at the grounds.
It sounded like a desperate, weeping cry echoing from the woods. I leaned closer to the glass, peering out into the moonlight. Standing on the gravel driveway, looking directly up at my window, were 2 figures. It was a teenage girl and a younger boy. My blood ran completely cold. The girl was the same figure I'd seen in the bathroom. She was smiling that awful, pained smile, her hands clutching the left side of her chest. But the boy is something that still haunts my nightmares.
He was incredibly thin, wearing ragged clothes. He raised his arms up toward my window, like he was begging me for something, or warning me. The moonlight hit his hands, and I saw that his fingernails were freakishly long, sharp, and almost translucent, like animal claws. And as he raised his arms, I saw his chest. There was a massive, black, gaping hole on the left side of his ribcage. His heart was completely gone.
He opened his mouth, and that horrible, desolate wailing sound filled my head. Then, in the blink of an eye, the 2 of them moved silently across the gravel and disappeared around the side of the house, heading toward the first-floor windows, toward Cousin Abney's study. I panicked. I grabbed my flashlight and ran out of my room, sprinting down the stairs. I didn't even care about being quiet anymore. I reached the ground floor and ran toward the study. I heard a sudden crash from inside, followed by a wet tearing sound, and a choked, gurgling scream that got cut off almost instantly.
I threw my weight against the heavy oak door. It burst open. The room was practically destroyed. Books were everywhere. A bronze brazier in the center of the room was knocked over, spilling hot coals onto the rug. On the desk, there was an empty silver goblet and a very long, perfectly clean hunting knife. And then I saw Cousin Abney. He was slumped back in his leather desk chair. His eyes were wide open, frozen in an expression of absolute, primal terror.
The left side of his chest had been torn entirely open. The rib cage was shattered. It looked like a wild animal had ripped him apart, but there was no blood on the floor, and no one else in the room. The window behind his desk was wide open, the curtains blowing in the night breeze. I backed out of the room and screamed for Mrs. Bunch. We called the police, and the official report stated that Abney had been killed by some kind of wild predator, maybe a rogue mountain lion or a bear that had gotten in through the window.
But before the police arrived, I saw something on Abney's desk. It was his private journal, open to the last page. I read the final entry before the cops bagged it as evidence. I still remember the exact words he wrote. He believed that by performing an ancient ritual, he could gain spiritual enlightenment and immortality. The journal said,
"The texts dictate that one may achieve absolute ascendancy over the physical world by absorbing the life force of 3 human beings under the age of 21. The hearts must be removed from the living subjects, reduced to ashes, and consumed in wine." He went on to list them. The first was the runaway girl, March 24th. The second was the wandering Italian boy, March 23rd. The final subject must be my cousin, Stephen. He is the right age. Tonight, March 24th, the cycle will be complete.
One must be prepared for the annoyance of the psychic remnants of the subjects, what the uneducated call ghosts. But a man of science will not be deterred by their feeble efforts for vengeance. He was waiting for me in that room with a silver cup and a knife. He murdered those 2 missing kids, and he was going to murder me. But whatever was left of them, whatever they were, they got to him first. They tore his chest open, the same way he did to them.
I'm in my 30s now, and I've never told anyone the full truth of what happened that night at Aswarby Estate. But every year, when March 24th rolls around, I make sure my windows are locked, and I listen to the wind, praying I never hear that wailing sound ever again. A massive thank you to the submitter for sharing such a terrifying piece of their past. It really makes you wonder how many unsolved missing persons cases are tied to dark, hidden secrets behind closed doors.
If you have a true scary story you'd like to hear narrated on the channel, be sure to send it to the email in the description below. If you enjoyed tonight's video, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Until next time, stay safe out there, and sleep well.
That was the story. The lamp will still be on when you wake. New stories every Friday at the late hour. Until then, watch your reflection.